Good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight, those of you here in the chamber and also those who are watching online or at ACTV. Welcome to our Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County agenda setting meeting. If you have electronic devices with you tonight, would you please turn them off or to silent? There'll be several opportunities tonight for public comment. And we're actually going to have two meetings. We're going to have a special call session and our agenda setting meeting, and we'll accept public comment at both meetings, and I will let you know when it's appropriate for that comment. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. There's a light on Ms. Bradlin's desk. It will turn yellow when you've got 5 seconds left, so please have your comments finished so there won't be any need to interrupt you. I ask that you be respectful of any other speakers and refrain from cheering, jeering, or other demonstrations. No votes are taken tonight at our agenda setting. Items on our discussion agenda will be discussed and voted on at our regular business meeting on July 5th. And there are agendas on the table to the right of the doors just outside if you'd like to have an agenda to follow along with us. So we will now go to our special call session. The purpose of that meeting is to consider requests from Athens Downtown Development Authority for funding for the support of a downtown fireworks event and any other item in proper order. Would you call the roll, Ms. Spratlin?
Dickerson, Sims.
Here.
Link. Here. Wright. Present. Bailey.
Present.
Neesmith.
Present.
Dale.
Here.
Burks.
Here.
Kind of slim tonight.
I went out to turn it.
And this is the time that any citizen that would like to speak to us about the agenda item that's on our special call session, if you'd like to talk to us, and that's the fireworks request for additional funding. Anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll come behind the rail.
Madam Mayor, I move for suspension of rules.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. We have a motion for suspension of rule. And second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and our first item, I've got a couple of things before we adjourn I want to bring to y'all, but would anybody like to open the discussion on the Downtown Authority?
Sure, I will.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Handy.
Mayor. And I appreciate y'all considering this at the short notice as it is. Certainly, July 4th is coming up next week, and this allows for an opportunity for a new event downtown and a fireworks event. And certainly there's few events that bring people downtown and help people to get to know one another. We have one this weekend that's going to do that, and certainly a fireworks festival will do that as well. This is going to be about a 25-minute fireworks show, and hopefully everything will go smooth. Nothing will catch on fire, and everybody will be safe. So I hope you'll consider the $9,000 that we're asking for. The CEP money is money that was left over from last year that was unused, and that's another component of this that we're asking for as well. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Is that a motion, Mike?
Yes, ma'am. I'll make a motion to approve.
You have a motion. Do I have a second? Motion second. Mr.
Yes, I'd
Bailey,
like
you want to say something?
To make a comment.
Sure.
Or comments. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As most of the people on the commission know, I used to do special events for a living, and I worked very closely with the Downtown Development Authority for many years. I've even gone and represented them, made presentations on doing downtown events. For one thing, at the statewide Downtown Development Convention. And I think I understand how the downtown development works and how they relate to events, because I've done events with downtown development's cooperation. And I'd like to say that my understanding of their mission does not include actually putting on events. And I know that one of the board members made a statement to that effect at the board meeting for the Downtown Development Authority. Absolutely, their mission includes supporting and enhancing events in downtown, but as far as being the actual producer and promoter of events, I don't think that's within their mission. So I can't really support the Clarke County government giving them money for something that's not really in their mission to begin with. So I just wanted to let you know why I'm going to vote against this.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Before I call on you, see if anybody, did you want to say something? Ms. Bright?
I did. Due to the fact that this is being covered with hotel motel tax, it's available. I'm always happy to see diverse usage of that. So I am supportive of that, as well as the whole idea of celebrating the 4th of July and maybe being able to kick it off the whole weekend on Friday maybe can become a tradition that we do, because you can't compete with Atlanta on the 4th of July and the peach tree and all the stuff around that. But maybe we can get people to start off here and then make their way over to Atlanta. It's going to be neat to see the new skyline with the fireworks and surprise some people. Some people will come because of it, and some people, it'll enhance their time that they're already planning to be here. But I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Ms. Link?
I'm okay with spending this money on fireworks in downtown. I think it'll be a fun event, and it'll get a diversity of folks into our downtown. And it's a Friday night, so we'll probably have a lot of folks there anyways. So I think it's guaranteed success. And I'm looking forward to it. I think this is an appropriate use of these funds, and it's not a humongous amount of money. And I also feel like having the ADD get their feet wet a little bit in seeing how our event planning ordinance works, or special events ordinance works, maybe we can step back and take another look at that ordinance, because I have heard concerns with folks who do event planning and special events downtown that there's some cumbersome stuff to it. So maybe this will help us get a little more insight into it and readdress it at some point.
Ms. Burke?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree it's a modest amount that's being requested from the ADDA. And certainly it may be a new venture for them, but I think falls in their broader mission of shining a spotlight on downtown Athens. I think about the number of times that I've gone to the fireworks at Bishop Park, where historically they've been for decades, and the array of citizens that you see there from all over Athens-Clarke County and certainly well beyond. And to think about bringing that array of citizens into downtown Athens is something that I think we've all talked about wanting to see this kind of greater sense of families, communities who might not normally spend time in downtown Athens. And so I think not only is the event going to be great, but it could potentially infuse some new life into downtown in the time ahead as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gertz. Anyone else before I get to Mr. Hamby? Mr. Neesmith?
I'm going to support this, but I do so reluctantly. I think that it was demonstrated that ADDA at this moment in time doesn't have the expertise to put on this kind of event. They underestimated the expenses very severely, and I was involved with, as was Jared, with the planning of the fireworks at Georgia Square Mall a couple of years ago, and they learned the hard way how difficult these kinds of events are to put on. The logistics are incredible. The safety concerns are incredible. The insurance expenses were bad enough at the Georgia Square Mall, but they're much higher downtown because of the density of the buildings and the level of police force that's required. So I'm hoping that next year we can sort of plan this better, and I'm sure we will if ADDA decides to do this. I will support it mostly because I know what a popular idea this is, that the Athens citizens really do want to do this. I've had a number of them call me, email me, and just grab me and say, we really want to do this, so I will support it.
Thank you, Mr. Neesmith. Before I call on Mr. Hamby, I'm going to give a shout out to our staff at the ADDA, because this is something that was not, the ADDA was not expecting to need to do this. This is something that we found out at the last minute that the mall decided not to do. And as a board, we all felt like it was something very important to our community that we wanted to follow up on. And I think the logistics have been difficult. There have been some unexpected costs, but I think our ADDA has done a magnificent job with planning it. Mr. Hamby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And certainly I was also working with the mall last year to help them with their event. And I remember former manager Alan Reddish also helping out on the county side with some of the police expenses like we're doing here today. And I do want to say, though, that certainly, as the mayor has said, the reason why the ADDA has gotten involved is because we recognized that there wasn't going to be a fireworks show in Athens for the 4th of July. And ADDA and Pam Thompson stepped up to the plate in a very short time frame to try to put something together. And what's happened is, it wasn't necessarily under budget in as much as the situations have changed. Certainly the crowd expectation has grown since we first looked at this. And the insurance is higher for the downtown area as opposed to the mall, simply because we've got a lot of buildings around downtown. and we want to make sure that they're safe, and we want to make sure that people who are coming downtown are safe. So there's justifiable reasons as to why the expenses have gone up, but everybody has been doing their homework and their due diligence to make sure that this will be a safe, fun event for everybody and for Athens and for America. So at any rate, I appreciate the support on that. And to Commissioner Bailey's point, you know, our druthers would have been to have a partner have helped us with this, but the short time frame prohibited that. We do have somebody helping us with it, with some food trucks and some children's activities that are coming, and so that part of it has been organized by a special events coordinator, and I think it's going to be a good event. It's going to be a good event, like Commissioner Gertz and Wright and Link have mentioned, that people will enjoy, and will be good for downtown and bring visibility downtown. Thank you.
I'm going to call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Me.
Mr. Bailey's opposed. And just to clarify this, I want to make sure all of our citizens know that we're going to be having fireworks on July the 1st. We were not able to get fireworks for July 4th at this late date, but there are going to be a lot of other July 4th events that people can go to. And this is going to be more than just fireworks. It's going to be a festival downtown. So, and I hope that our whole community takes ownership of it and enjoys it. So I look forward to it and hope everybody else does too. And before we go to adjournment from our special called meeting, there are a couple of items of business that I need to take care of so that they can get into Ms. Bratlin's minutes, since we are in an official meeting now. One, because of the death of Mitch Schrader, our tax commissioner, we are short a member on the Land Bank Authority, and they've got some pretty important business to take care of quickly. And so we need to have that committee at full force. So I have a nomination of Keisha Payne for the Land Bank Authority, and I'd entertain a motion for her acceptance.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the second thing that I'd like to go ahead and get into a committee is you all will remember that several months ago, probably 4 or 5 months ago now, we asked our staff to do some research and come back to us with suggestions for potential ordinance relating to discrimination in our downtown bar scene. And our county attorney has come up with some suggestions for changes in ordinance. And basically they're going to relate to, there'll be some changes in ordinance, but they'll also relate to the process. And so that y'all understand why it's going to GOC committee, we've got a couple of things in our legislative review committee that they're working on. GOC has not had anything to work on for a little bit, so I'm going to send it to GOC committee so they can get to work on this, and ask them if they'll try to get us back an answer for our September meeting. So now we can have a motion to adjourn. If somebody,
Move for adjournment of the special call meeting.
thank you, Mr. Sims.
I'll second.
Do you have all in favor of adjourning our special call meeting?
Aye.
Okay, we'll now go to our agenda setting meeting. And first order of business for our agenda setting meeting is public input on items 1 through 12. And I've given you all the rules about public input. So if anybody would like to talk to us about any of those items, please come to the podium. Let us know which item you're addressing. And remember our 3-minute rule.
Hi, my name is Chris Dowd. I live at 245 North Harris Street. So I'm addressing item 2. So that's allowing growlers for sale at brewpubs. I just want to support this. I think it's a growing industry in Athens, and I just want to thank you all for putting this on the consent agenda and for hopefully voting for it. I think this is definitely a good step. I'm sure the brewpubs appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else wish to speak to us on these items? Okay, we'll come behind the rail. Is there any commissioner that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Ms. Link?
Numbers 6, 8, and 10.
Okay. Did you want clarification tonight, or you just want those to go on our discussion agenda for next meeting? Do you have any questions or anything you'd like to get clarified tonight?
I think I'd like to see them on the discussion agenda.
Okay. Ms. Bratton, did you get those? Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to remove item 2.
Item 2, okay. Anyone else? Okay. Items 2, 6, 8, and 10 will go on our discussion agenda. Pardon it. Did you want clarification? You just want to keep it on
I
that
see an
discussion?
issue with it. Small, but nonetheless an issue.
Okay. Okay, we will now go to our citizen input on our old and new business items. There are no old business items. We have items 13 through 15 new business. Anyone that would like to speak to those, this would be the time to come and talk to us.
Did I understand 13?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening. My name is Gary Hedrick. I live at 1005 Lavender Road. My wife and I moved to Athens in 1979. We've been in the same home since then. Consider ourselves permanent residents. I'd like to speak to you regarding item number 13, the sub-project number 3, I believe, of the Rails to Trails project. I represent Firefly Trail Incorporated, a local group of citizens who've been working for several years to see the length of this trail be not just here in Athens, but all the way to Union Point. And I'm the author of the letter that brings us to this proposal working its way before this body tonight. As best I'm able to do with my retired high school math teacher capabilities, it looks to me like the Firefly Trail in Clarke County would have a length that's approximately 46% of the width of our county. Think about the good that can be done for citizens having recreational access and the health-related items that tie themselves to that recreational access. I can't say free, because we all know it's not. There's a high price tag, but it's no cost every time you go and use it. Who would like to say we don't need the health style in our community that comes from that? This is a stroke that has not been made since 1979 when I moved here. It's amazing when you really dig into the weeds and see what's available here for the citizens of the community. Can you imagine the financial impact that this potentially can have? Go to any trail that you can find and look at the history of what happens when the trail is established and use patterns begin to be developed. There is significant positive financial impact. And we are here to support it. Our organization has requested to be involved as we can best be used. We don't have an agenda on, well, we have a little suggestion, but it's not really an agenda. If that's how we can help, we'd like to do it. If there are other ways, we can do that also. And we know that there is a great deal of support in the community, but we also know that sometimes eyebrows get raised and people still say, well, what's that? They don't really understand. So we'd like to be a part of helping them to understand that. One more fact, and I'll be finished. As I look at traillink.com, the National Rail to Trail website, as best I can calculate, when the entire Firefly Trail is created, it will be the second longest trail in the state of Georgia if you don't count Peachtree City. They say they have 99 miles, but I think some of that's golf cart paths over there if you look at it real closely. And we'll be the longest rural trail in Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. Now, I'd like to have our community be the anchor of that economic impact. It is an engine waiting to be turned on.
Thank you, Mr. Hedrick. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor, how are you? Commission, I'm here. My name is Dodd Farrell. I live at 230 North Georgia Avenue, Winterville, Georgia. I'm here to address item number 13. I'm here as a representative of the city of Winterville as its mayor and as an advocate for the trail as well. I won't take all the 3 minutes, but in Winterville, the economic stability that Gary mentioned is something that we really look forward to. The things we're doing in Winterville to get ready for something like this, as far as some protective measures for design guidelines downtown to get our business corridor ready for something like this to come through and not boom our town in the wrong direction, but be a real economic engine for a screen door community with protections in place that we have through our ordinances. It's going to keep us a small town, which is what we want to stay. But we also want to be an asset to the county, which I think we can be, and just 6.5, 7 miles out could provide a real nice trail for people that are already using our town. We already have the recreational tourism is already in Winterville. The only thing we're lacking is the multi-use path for the people to use. That's it. So I'm an advocate for the trail. Thank you for your
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm Carl Jordan, 185 Kings Road. I address the rail trail, item 13. This is the week, 16 years ago, that Larry Mize, contractor for CXX, began demolition of the final segment of the Georgia Railroad's Athens branch, which for 100 years was downtown Athens' vital lifeline east to Augusta, Savannah, and Charleston. The first and easiest demolition were the ancient wooden trestles over College Avenue and Thomas Street. Then came the modern steel trestle over Peter Street, still lying in the woods on Marion Cartwright's property off Barnett Shoals Road. That weekend, on Sunday evening, I may have been the last person to have walked between East Broad and Peter Street in 7 minutes without breaking a sweat, because the next day the big crane arrived to drop the towering North Oconee trestle into the river to be shipped to New Jersey, to lower the original 1883 steel span across Wilkerson Street, shipped to an Arizona golf course, and to begin dismantling the iconic Murmur trestle. Some timbers were sawed for the wooden fence at the J&J Center, others to define parking lots, and others were piled up by the county behind the jail. By the 4th of July, it was all gone, except for a standing segment of the Murmur trestle. Larry Mize did all that work for $85,000, plus salvage, plus the $25,000 we paid to protect the Murmur remnant. Now we are spending multi-millions to restore it, and after 16 years, we are finally making some progress. I wish I could tell you that the resolutions before you tonight would significantly contribute to that progress, but they do not. The rail trail concept to Winterville has already been approved. The corridor is protected by the transportation map, and the SPLOST authorization precludes continuation to the county line. The generous advocacy offered by Firefly Inc. and Athens Land Trust is most welcome, but I wish I understood specifically what greater role is being proposed. Now, tonight, if your intent is significant progress, not wishful gestures, I recommend the following. 1, authorize initiation of the preliminary design phase for the currently approved subproject number 2, allowing right-of-way acquisition and taking the trail to Winterville. 2, collaborate with the city of Winterville, and I was glad to see a representative of Winterville here tonight, to establish a trail concept, a sub-project 3 within Winterville to the depot and within the parameters of the SPLOST 11 authorization. And most importantly, as a priority, establish a sub-project number 4 that uses local funds to construct the trestle across Trail Creek that will finally let you and me and everyone else walk once again from East Broad to Dudley Park to Peter Street in 7 minutes without breaking a sweat, and for the park and ride finally to become the transportation hub for which it was intended. That will be real progress, because until then, without that missing link, the public return on our $10 million investment in everything else will have been wasted.
Anyone else wish to speak to us? Okay, seeing none, we'll come behind the rail and we'll go to item number 13. Does anyone wish to comment on that, Ms. Lynn?
I have some questions about that trestle, because I feel like the functionality of this trail kind of won't be very functional unless that trestle is completed. What are our plans? Is there any near future plans for getting that trestle underway and up and running?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about that several years ago. Right now, there's a on-the-ground connection through Dudley Park to connect the rail trail out to Old Winterville Road, or Winterville Road, I should say. The trestle discussion some years ago was fairly involved. What was it going to be made of? How much is it going to cost? How will we maintain it in the future? So the idea was that I think the discussion at the time was, let's get these segments built, and then we'll see how much money we got left over and decide then. And it was, if I remember correctly, a couple $1 million proposition to do the trestle. What you have before you tonight there's nothing about the trestle in this project concept.
Anyone else wish to speak to this? Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple comments that I'll make in a minute, but I guess just to sort of kick off some dialogue. But Blaine, could you talk a little bit about the enhancement that's viewed through a partnership with the Firefly Incorporated Group and the Athens Land Trust versus kind of where we stand with the Rail Trail Committee and the Unified Government?
Absolutely. And we were approached by the Firefly Trail Inc., specifically Gary and Mary Cook, a couple of their board members, they were saying, how can we help move this project forward? And at that first meeting, they made the statement that they knew of some property owners that may be willing to donate immediately. And as you know, probably the thing that takes the longest in any project like this is land acquisition, and property changes hands. So what I told them at that point was, well, the biggest way that you could help is to go ahead and facilitate the donation of some easements towards those purposes. And the land trust could hold those easements and transfer them to the unified government when the mayor and commission decided that this was something that they wanted to do. And I can address that here in just a second. And they also offered to do some advocacy as well. And obviously this needs to be vetted through public hearings, and we need to notify the property owners. And another statement was made that perhaps if the land trust offered to hold the easements, some people may be more comfortable with that as opposed to dealing with the government immediately. So we felt like we have a mechanism here to accept donations of easements in the short term that might be helpful. And we haven't partnered like that before, but we would need some type of memorandum of understanding and an agreed upon legal easement donation document that would allow for the transfer of those easements at the point that we're ready to receive them. As far as the question about that this has already been approved, there was some language back when Project 2 or Project B or Subproject B was approved, and it mentioned 2 Old Winterville Road, and then in parentheses it said City of Winterville. So what we wanted to do is make absolutely clear, because if you know, and this is what was interesting about Athens, the road changes names. Once you get past, is it Rannicky Road? It becomes Athens Road. And so we just want to be clear that this is the scope of the work that we're undertaking. And there's also been some questions about, well, does this include within the city limits of Winterville? And we want to clarify all that with this sub-project 3, and that's why we're bringing it back towards you.
I appreciate it, Blaine. When I look at the SPLOST 2011 referendum language and it says to Winterville, my reading of that, particularly given the history, would be that it would be really to encompass the entirety of the history of Winterville. And, I'm certainly glad to see that defined in a more clear fashion. And so that, I think, is helpful. And certainly I've said publicly and privately to many people that, as we're moving closer to the end of the SPLOST 2011 package, if additional dollars remain, I would like to see some portion of those contributed toward expansion of the rail trail that we already have defined, from downtown Athens through the city of Winterville to the county limits with Oglethorpe County. I think it is, as folks mentioned earlier, going to be a powerful economic development engine. It's going to be a great recreational opportunity. And what I would certainly hope from this partnership is that we develop more energy around the project. And I think really every segment that ends up being acquired either through easement or fee simple acquisition is going to shine more of a spotlight on the project and going to bring more energy to it. And so certainly I agree with my former colleague Carl Jordan that I would love not to have seen the dissolution of some components of this, and I would love to see that at-grade crossing, rather than the series of switchbacks that are envisioned in the short term. But effectively every member of the public that is on that is going to be a new advocate for the trail. And certainly I think an advocate for other rail trails, and I hope to see the Rail Trail Committee branch out and look at some of the other opportunities that are out there in the county. That there's one that a lot of folks have talked about that used to deliver coal to UGA. There's a disused rail line in the Athens-Tech area that could certainly be a great recreational opportunity. So I think we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg of what we could see countywide. And I'm glad to have more partners. There's more bullhorns that are out there on the street and more people who do have these defined relationships with property owners. And so the more the merrier in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add this too, because I want to make sure that there's, and I'll provide you some additional information, but we went back and looked at the original project description, and it mentioned 3 phases, one coming from Athens out to Old Winterville Road. A second phase was the build out of the trail within the city limits of Winterville, starting at the depot and radiating to the edges of the town, 1.5 miles. And the third was acquiring all this land and constructing it in between. So I've heard it's called the bookend approach. And so that's why we didn't feel like that was very clear in the language. You know, you could argue, well, to the city limits of Winterville would be to the edge. So we went back to the original project request form, and then we wanted to clarify all that with this subproject number 3.
Anybody else? Okay, we're going to item number 14, Greenway Network.
Consent agenda items that were held.
Oh, I'm sorry. But I was asking y'all if y'all want clarification, if you just want to take them off the agenda for our meeting, and I misunderstood what you were asking for. Absolutely, sure. We'll go back to our consent agenda before we go to the next item. And item number 2, Jerry, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you were asking me for.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, very much. The question I have is in the growler sales by brewpubs, which is paragraph G. There's a sentence towards the center there that says, except as authorized in accordance with a valid growler tasting permit issued pursuant to this chapter, no filled growlers may be consumed on the licensed premises. Well, there is no authorization to consume filled growlers on the premises in any part of our growler law. So I'm wondering why this statement is in here. Perhaps someone from LRC. I'm sorry, Jeff. Perhaps someone from LRC can clarify why this particular phrase is in here, because it doesn't seem to have any relevance whatsoever.
I defer to the attorney.
Jim, are you familiar with this, or we're going to need to wait for Bill?
I'll apologize. I am not familiar with what went into that. I can certainly find out, but right off the top of my head, I don't know.
We can respond to you.
At the next meeting?
Oh, before the next meeting.
Oh.
I mean, the next couple of days, we can give you an answer.
All right.
And we'll give it to the entire commission.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Well, I had actually highlighted that too, because I had a question about that, Jerry. So,
Allison seems to have the answer over there.
No, I'm going to defer. I've got a 9 o'clock soccer game to get to.
So she wants us to go and move on. So we'll leave this off the consent agenda for now. So, Melissa, did you want to deal with these other items, or were you just taking them off consent to be discussed at our regular meeting?
Yeah, I'd like to see them discussed at the regular meeting.
But no discussion needed tonight?
No, not right now.
Okay, good. Okay, we'll move on to item, I believe it's number 13. It's coming up next. Oh, I thought she said she just wanted to leave it.
Number 6.
Melissa, I'm sorry. Did you want to discuss those tonight?
Well, I think maybe number 6. I just want to point out. I feel like it needs those events need a public reading. We're talking about money for the ADDA events funding, and I thought it would be good to at least publicly read those. Let me find it here. I can find them.
Would you like me to read them for you?
I got it. I found it. It looks like we're going to be helping to support AthFest, the Parade of Lights, the Twilight Criterium, the Hot Corner Celebration, the Farmers Market, the Wild Rumpus, the Symphony, the Athens Symphony, Slingshot, the Human Rights Festival, and Athens Pride, which is a new one this year, which I'm looking forward to. So I feel like those just need a public reading, and I feel like those can go back on consent.
Okay. Well, actually, the Human Rights Festival is the new one on there this year.
Oh, is it?
$2,000.
And I have some concerns about number 8, the landfill on-call services. I have questions for staff about the criteria for choosing the particular companies and what made us choose one over the other. And maybe if staff can get some more information back to me, I kind of feel like that needs some discussion. Because we are going to be seeing some expansion of our landfill, so I think it's kind of important. And the quitclaim, I am having a problem supporting any more of these alleyway quitclaims. I see a lot of potential as we look towards in-town density and some more affordable housing options in our single-family neighborhoods. I feel like it's important to preserve those right-of-ways behind our houses, and we see this is a popular form of increasing that density and increasing options for housing in other communities, and they're actually allowing what they call laneway houses and accessory dwelling units and backyard cottages. And I just feel like, you know, with the discussions we're starting to have about our need for affordable housing, especially in our most desirable neighborhoods, I feel like we really need to think about keeping those alleyways open and think about the long-term possibilities for the need for more density and more housing options in these neighborhoods. So I'm not supportive of the quitclaim, and I'm hoping we can initiate a deeper discussion about it.
We will leave both of these on the regular agenda. So item number 10 will be voted on separately, and any other discussion we can do at our regular meeting. The solid waste information, Mr. Williams, you're going to get some information, but we'll leave them both. We leave all three of these that you asked for off for the moment. Okay, we'll get back to item number 13.
14. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So item 13 stays on discussion. Item number 14, anyone wish to talk about that one? Have any questions?
We gotten public input on all this?
I thought we asked for new business input, did we not?
All right.
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I thought so. Yeah.
I was expecting something.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Gertz.
Yes,
Madam Mayor, I just want to say that I'm excited at the prospect of inclusion of a couple of components that'll attach directly to some dense residential areas on this segment of the Greenway. I think both the legs that are envisioned in this agenda report are ones that ultimately would be well utilized. And I was also excited in the context of the work session to hear staff talk a little bit about what is already underway in the future Greenway Network Plan document with a kind of broader range of trail options and styles that I think will more closely align with the varying needs of different parts of the community and really the different kinds of topography we have and proximity to upland or lowland areas as well. So anyhow, I'm very excited, and I mean really to know that everybody who's connected to this component could get from College Station Road to Dudley Park and then take the rail trail east from there. It's exciting.
Mr. Neesmith.
Madam Mayor, this is an example of our government working very well in discussing and vetting and determining what the best routes are. There are alternatives to these routes, and I can say unequivocally that all of those alternatives were considered by the user group, by the planning committee of the Greenway Commission. They were all thoroughly walked, discussed, and these are the ones that the Greenway Commission and the user group and leisure services all agreed were the better choices. So even though some would say there are other better choices, because those people have done such good work and have vetted these so thoroughly, I'm going to be supporting it.
Ms. Rollins.
I appreciate the extra labeling on the map since we saw it at work session. Very nice. This is in my district, and it has been vetted thoroughly and through all the channels and protocol. And I would like to know if we can put it on consent agenda.
Anybody have an objection to being on consent? Okay.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go to item number 15, which is live stream pipe emergency repair. And I guess y'all have all read the agenda item. Are there any questions or any discussion about this?
I just want to say, thank goodness.
Yeah.
We need to get on this.
We need to get this fixed.
This
right.
is something that's just decaying before our eyes, and I'm glad we're moving on it and being aggressive about it, whatever it takes.
And for the benefit of those in the public that don't know what we're talking about, this is where we had the sinkhole in Baxter at the car wash, and we're moving forward with getting that.
The growing sinkhole.
Yeah, before it grows anymore. Okay. Do y'all want to put this on consent, or y'all want to keep it on?
Put on consent.
It's fine
Okay,
by
put
me.
that on consent, Gene. Okay, we will now go to our staff reports from Clarke County Planning. Would you come join us, Brad? I think that's what she said. She wanted to get out by 9. Oh, by 8. I thought she said by 9.
I know, she did say that. But
I don't think we'll make it by 8.
I think so.
Might, we might. I'd be happy with that. You ready, Brad?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, we have two for you this evening. First is a straight rezone request at 90925 US Highway 29 North, from commercial rural to commercial general. And overall, it encompasses approximately 78 acres. Whoa, I'm doing it now too. One parcel and a portion of another parcel from CR to CG. The initial phase of this would be for smaller retail and office type uses along the frontage with larger scale uses to the rear, which is compatible with the language in the community center mixed use comprehensive plan designation. And with a straight rezone like this, the plans that you have in front of you are non-binding, only for access and clearing and grading for marketing purposes, hence the conditions that come to you from the Planning Commission with regard to access and connectivity. You see the two properties here highlighted in red, either side of Highway 29 North, just above the Trail Creek Village Kroger Shopping Center development. And actually, and I'll show you when we get the plans, there are a couple of connection points on the north corner of the Kroger development that this actually would tie into. An aerial view of existing conditions along the corridor, a future development map classification of community center mixed use, of which commercial general is a compatible zoning district. And you see on the left and to the right, the red being commercial general, which this property is requesting to go to, and it is a fairly logical tie-in in terms of having CG already to the north as well. And then the red line that you see going from the intersection of Voiles Road and Highway 72 across and ultimately to Danielsville Road at J.J. Harris Elementary School is the future connector road, east-west from 72 to Danielsville Road, that we've been looking at on our transportation map for a long time, and this property obviously is a critical component of it if and when it is developed in terms of assuring that connectivity. This is the property on the right-hand side of 29 going out, and this being the proposed 80-foot future right-of-way connecting point that would go across ultimately to Voiles at Highway 72. No binding plan here from a standpoint of proposed uses at this point. It is being marketed for such development. If you're familiar with the Trail Creek Village development, the northernmost access point onto 29, kind of to the rear of the Kroger, which sits about here. This is the truck turnaround. There's a connection point. This road is in and it comes out onto 29. And right now there's just some real significant steep topography once you get on this side. All of that dirt would be removed, redistributed on site for that access to continue across. And then on the western side of 29 North, again, continuing the road, you see the proposed out parcels initially in the front. There are conditions that deal with two properties, one being Nice, which is this piece. that what the staff recommendation was looking for was just some assurance that there would be future public access connectivity from this point across, at some point, along this property line at Nice. And Teaster was the other piece, which is this one, and a future connection point. At this time, when this rear portion of the property is developed, we would be looking for cross-access connections and easements for the assurance of long-term connectivity from this piece all the way to the corner at the Kroger. There's also a condition in the staff recommendation and planning commission recommendation, a couple things. One, it's talking about realigning the 80-foot future right-of-way to within 200 feet of this western corner. The way this is designed at this point, this really doesn't go to the point that we need it to at the light on 72. It's going to an easement that's further to the south. We really need that road to hit in this location somewhere. I believe there may be a commission-defined option coming forward that's going to modify the language to give the developer some flexibility. There are some ways to realign this road to move it this way, where it ultimately, this is a straight connection, and then there could be a road coming off of it into this easement. I think we're probably okay with that. The conditions that you see from the Planning Commission were all generated by staff and accepted by the Planning Commission. The other condition you see on both sides of the road was the elimination completely of this right-in, right-out only curb cut point. There is a median. There cannot be any left turn movements here, but that's also something I know the applicant is very interested in trying to have returned and allowed to have those right-in, right-outs. Distance-wise, from this intersection to this one, probably a little bit further than the right-in, right-outs that you have along 72 at Kroger right now. That same situation with the median in the middle. So the staff recommendation to you, and ultimately the Planning Commission recommendation, is to approve with conditions. These are kind of lengthy, but basically what they say are, the first one, tying down that 80-foot access road over to Voiles within 200 feet of that corner that I showed you, the elimination of those interior right-in, right-out only driveways, the interconnections with Trail Creek Village property must be kept in place and continued. Teaster and Nice we talked about in terms of those future connections. Traffic light at the main access point, the cost of the warrant study and any installation shall be borne by the applicant, and we need a little more detailed survey work. What we were trying to do with this one, we normally don't bring you straight rezonings that don't have binding plans with them. This one seemed to make a lot of sense to us from a land use standpoint, given that the property was already identified as community center. It seemed to be a logical extension, but we were very concerned with ensuring that we get the connectivity across the property and ultimately over to Voiles. J.J. Harris Elementary, when it was designed and built, is designed with that connection. It's already there for ultimately a tie-in onto Danielsville if and when down the road we get it all the way across. So we wanted to make sure all of those stayed in place, and the recommendation from the Planning Commission was to approve with those conditions.
Mr. Kurtz, this is in your area. Would you like to address
Yes, it is. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a part of town where there's been lots of development interest. Several years ago, of course, Public Utilities ran sewer to this area, which we know is a big driver of access and opportunity, given what can be done with versus without. In addition, you've got about 40,000 vehicles a day that move through that intersection there where 29 and 72 meet one another. So just an enormous number of people, not only kind of traveling within Athens-Clarke County, but people coming from Danielsville and Hartwell and Comer and Elberton and even beyond. So we've got, the Trail Creek Shopping Center that we approved a couple of years ago. And this would really be sort of additional tie-in to that sort of commercial energy there. And it's interesting just thinking in the big picture, as much hand-wringing as some people might have made about retail in Athens-Clarke County. I mean, if you think about what's on the ground now, what's planned and forthcoming here and in downtown as well, I mean, really we're seeing probably in the span of 3 or 4 years, 300,000 square feet or more of new fully leased commercial space, and certainly contributing tax dollars to both our general operating budget and to the SPLOST package as well. So just lots of energy going on. What the applicant is interested in, and I emailed some information about this earlier to you today, is some degree of flexibility in terms of the internal road design. I think it is very important that, unlike some of the development patterns of, say, the 60s and 70s, that you do have rear access and interparcel connectivity so that you could get from, as Brad described, the Kroger area to this new prospective development without having to enter onto Highway 29. In terms of the Voiles access, the exact language that's in the agenda report recommendation with the 200-foot distance from the property line may be a little too prescribed, and I'd like to bring forward some commission-defined option language that would simply ensure that when build out of that component of the property happens, that direct access to Voiles is allowed. I think the applicant's very interested in making sure that there's that interconnectivity. I mean, certainly that would be the natural access point if someone was to come from Winterville, for example, to this development, so that they want to see that happen. But there is a degree of uncertainty, since this is a straight rezone, of exactly where the building footprints would be on the ground once they come forward. So that was one component of a prospective commission-defined option. Another had to do with those two access points to the neighboring parcels that Brad mentioned. And similarly, you know, if there's a 50,000 square foot building on one of those, the connection point may be in one location. If there's a 30,000 square foot building, it might be a slightly different location. And so I think they're just interested in knowing that they're going to create that connection point, but not creating it until the occupant of the land is defined. The final thing that I would like you to consider in a commission-defined option is inclusion of those two right-in, right-out components that Brad discussed. Those would mean that the curb cuts were about 500 feet apart, which is well beyond what GDOT requires. GDOT wants somewhere between 350 and 450 feet, depending on what the turn lanes look like. And so this would be well within what GDOT's expectations are. Just to give you kind of a general idea, if you were to stand on the front steps of City Hall here, 500 feet would be in the middle of Doherty Street. So, you know, it's a pretty significant stretch, and I think not overly onerous. The way that these parcels are set up, you'd essentially have two structures and then a curb cut, two more structures and then a curb cut. I think much less choppy than we've seen in a lot of earlier developed areas. So I think still contributing positively to the corridor and not being kind of overly demanding either. So that about sums it up, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about what will be in that commission-defined option. But I emailed out information about that earlier today.
Mr. Neesmith.
I was wondering, would these more flexible ways of defining the interconnectivity, would that be something that could be decided administratively by Brad at the time of plans review?
Brad could probably talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah.
The modified language is simply going to give them more flexibility than the 200 feet in the northwest corner.
I'm all for that, yeah.
But it would. Good. Our biggest concern is that the road is a direct connection from Voiles to 29 and not a turn from another road, and so I would have some flexibility, as I understand the commission-defined option coming forward to work with them to
so
ensure
naturally,
that.
it goes without saying, you would assure that the language is appropriate for what you need to do. Very good.
Anybody else?
Just one thing, you mentioned curb cuts, and the curb cuts, but you also mentioned median. There are some medians in there. How does that play in this in terms of getting those curb cuts? Because they, like I said, they do have medians on this particular route.
Yes, and this is probably the best place to show it. These are the two curb cuts that Commissioner Gertz is discussing. There is a median break existing here, and that would be the primary entrance onto both sides where a signal would go. These would simply be right in, right out only curb cuts with no ability to cross to the other side.
Yeah, so essentially, if you missed that first turn, you'd be able to make the next one. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, move on to the next one, Brad.
Okay. Next item is a special use permit at 175 and 250 Carriage Lane. It's in an RM1 district. It's for a fraternity house with a variance to reduce slightly the amount of required parking. No change to the future development designation, and with all of our special uses, if approved, the report plan and elevations become binding. These are the two properties right now to be combined to form the overall 6 acres and change that would be for the fraternity house. It's a 21-bed fraternity home to be located at the end of Carriage Lane. Currently undeveloped site. It slopes fairly significantly from the cul-de-sac down to the river, as you can see from the topo on this drawing. This is an overall drawing of the proposed fraternity location and associated parking, and then an enlargement of that. Let me go back here just for a minute. There are a couple things in play here, some of which were very seriously looked at by the Planning Commission. You have existing apartments along Carriage Lane to the left as you come in. There's kind of a secondary access point, the primary being on Barnett Shoals to the Woodlands development, which is all of this multifamily built about 10 years ago. And then this would be the proximity of the fraternity house about here. There's also a future road connection on our transportation map that would extend Bailey ultimately, as you see here on the red line, to the terminus of Bailey Street, be a Carriage Lane extension up to Bailey at this point. And then there is a family cemetery. The Neely families have a cemetery, and this is the property at this location. And there were members of the Neely family present at the Planning Commission meeting as well that obviously had concerns with development and the protection of their family property. So as we move through, 21 beds on a fraternity house here, you see the location. From a topography standpoint, there's a couple things going on. They are showing the future alignment of the road connection here on the plan. So if and when that ultimately comes to fruition, it is designed into this plan to allow it to occur without amendment. There's also a greenway connection from Carriage Lane that you see in the very heavy dash line here that would come off of Carriage. It traverses the property and then onto our property at this location. There's discussion of a buffer. There was a lot of discussion about protection of the cemetery. There was a condition added by the Planning Commission to require a planted buffer at the 750 contour line, which is approximately this line here, extending all the way across to the point where it hits the future right-of-way of the road, which provides some protection and screening from the cemetery property. It should also be noted that the house, finished floor elevation at the front of this house sits about 20 feet below grade of the property at the top. So there is some topographical separation as well. And then they've also gone ahead and designed in that future road extension with a modified driveway if and when that were to occur. One thing I need to point out to all of you, and we've highlighted it in the report, but I want to make sure everybody understands. Our report, when we originally presented it, when you're looking at a special use, identified this property as having the ability to be developed with about 110 bedrooms of multifamily. And there were some planning commissioners that looked at that very closely. There were some planning commissioners that had very significant concerns with the development of this property in this way and its impact on the cemetery property. They looked at that 110 bedrooms, which we had in our report, and that's an error. I mean, that's just not an accurate number, and I'll take responsibility for that one. Technically, it gets 110 bedrooms, but about 80 of those bedrooms were transferred to the Woodlands about 10 years ago when that was developed. So in fact, while the property can still be developed, if it were to be developed for multifamily purposes, it gets about 30 bedrooms instead of 110. It could still be developed for assisted living. It could still be developed for a nursing home, those types of facilities. But the 110 bedrooms, while accurate for the acreage, is not technically accurate. And so we have put that in your report, and we've also highlighted in the report the two areas where we indicated to the Planning Commission the same thing. I did reach out to one of our planning commissioners who was very concerned as this went through and let her know that, one, I would be telling you this evening, and just to kind of get her feedback. I didn't want her to hear it here first, and she felt fairly strongly that she would have probably voted differently on it if she would have known that. And that was Maxine Eastham, and she told me that she was happy to let you know that. Yeah. I mean, I look at this from a special use, and we've dealt with this in some special uses over on Cars Hill as well. I think there are still some advantages to this as a special use, even versus the 30. Let me jump back. I did two things. One of the things I looked at was, after a recommendation from the Planning Commission, if there is misinformation in our report, which there was, do I have the authority to pull it from the agenda and bring it back to the Planning Commission? And the ordinance does not give me any authority to do that at this point for something that we didn't produce or generate initially. So I did want to make sure that you knew that this evening. From a development standpoint, if approved, this becomes, as we've talked about before, a binding plan. So the buffer that is a condition of the recommendation would be required to be put in. The location of the Greenway connection, which is the preferred location, when we talk to the SPLOST staff in terms of where they want it to be, becomes binding. The location of the driveway, the proximity of the house, all of those things, there are assurances in terms of separation from the cemetery that will happen in the way that you see it here for a fraternity house. If it were to be developed, even with the 30 beds that still remain on this property, as an administrative permit, you could see 7, for an example, you could see 7 of the 4-bedroom student cottages that we see, a lot on Cars Hill and in East Athens that could be developed by right, that could be administratively placed across this top end of the property in very close proximity to the cemetery property, and there's no required buffer because both of the pieces are zoned multifamily. So there are some opportunities here for some additional protection, but I did want to be very clear that the 110 bedrooms was discussed at Planning Commission too as an alternate to a fraternity house with 21. So just want to make sure that's all on the record for you at this point.
Brad, before you leave that, show me where the cemetery is now on this.
Cemetery is right here.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So, there is, the location of the Greenway is here. There's about a 20-foot drop from the back property line down to the front of this house, and about 5 to 6 feet down that hill from the edge is where the evergreen planted buffer would have to be put in. I think it was conditioned at 6 feet tall at the time of planning to provide a screen, largely just to, so it's not clearly visible and there is a little bit of separation. None of those things would be required under a by right permit, even at 30 beds. So there are some pros and cons both ways. Future extension. The variance was to reduce the parking by about 15 spaces. There is ample area to provide the additional parking if the variance is not granted here. But there are 55 spaces and 21 beds. They felt like it was just additional parking that would not be necessary. We felt like it was worth supporting, and the Planning Commission as well recommended to you that variance to reduce parking be approved and the special use be approved with the condition you see there of the vegetative screen, as I pointed out earlier.
Allison, this is yours. Would you like to talk to us?
Yeah. Brad, are they moving from Millage? Do you know which one this is? I can't picture where they are currently.
I do not. I don't know where they are currently.
Is somebody losing them, or I just getting them relocated? Maybe they're on River
This
Road.
may be one that
Micah,
does
are
not
you
currently
losing
have a house.
That's what I was thinking.
You recognize them? Pi Kappa Psi? Anyway.
Were they moving from somewhere?
Somehow, yeah.
Okay.
I remember him saying it, but I forget where.
Okay. They're moving from somewhere.
Okay, we'll figure that out. I just thought you might know.
I can let you know that for sure.
So on that last picture, and I apologize because I'm not able to zoom in enough to be clear because I'm trying to make sure we're all picturing that Greenway trail that we just now approved and put on consent. So this circle up in the top right, that's the current dead end of that road, isn't it?
Yes.
Where the apartments would be off to the right, about where the compass is?
Right here. Mhm.
Okay.
Carriage Lane apartments are in this location.
Okay, so those are a cluster of apartments, and then there's a big gate that goes to what would be student up there.
Woodlands apartment is really off the top of the map up here,
Okay.
and then the Greenway connection would come off, run along the northern edge of this property until it got past the cemetery property, and then move on to the I think this is Athens-Clarke County property.
Okay. And so at the end of that circle, currently, you can see sort of a dirt road for that greenway access. It's kind of an informal trail at this point. And this is completely undeveloped at this point.
This is completely undeveloped, yes.
Okay. All right. And then the river, we're not encroaching on, they're not, how's that?
Rivers down here, and they're well outside of the environmental buffers.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Guys, if that's all, we can go home. Got you out plenty of time, Allison.
Thank you.